Hi.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the, entertainment edition of Sub and Countercultures. I'm Brian Courtney.
I'm Darren Jolly.
And we are here to entertain you for at least 2 episodes.
We use that word entertaining in a very loose way. But we find ourselves entertaining, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's part of that catharsis that he's always talking about.
I think it's objectively entertaining. That would mean that I think that I'm... Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. Okay.
So we're going to talk about, hip-hop, punk rock music, those were 2 of the things that we talked about in the first 2 classes of the summer semester. But since we're talking about media, we're probably going to talk about punk rock and hip-hop again. We also left out heavy metal, which was sub/counterculture. I don't know if we're going to talk about albums necessarily, or bands, or specific songs, so we're just gonna fucking go and see where we go. You have anything to lead off with?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say specifically, but a lot, like when I was going over the stuff that I was going over for the last 24 hours specifically, and like, maybe I should have not told my fucking story from the Dead shows, like in the last, maybe that would have been better.
That was a good story.
But it would have been better, like in the pop culture side of things. Although we're kind of, there's a lot of crossover here again, and we're not like categorically restrictive individuals, but
I would be if he'd let me.
Yeah, that's gonna never fly though. So if he were to be like hyper specific, this would be the Brian Courtney Short Bus Debate Club, where he sits here and debates with his fucking self.
Which really would be a short bus debate.
It would be, yeah, and it'd be a little bit like masturbation, like
short bus schizophrenic debate.
I'm gonna put myself in a white room with what do they call those things?
Straight jacket.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I'm gonna pop my arm out so I can jerk myself off and then put it back in. That's pretty much what it would turn into.
It's very creative,
in a bad picture, not a picture that anybody ever really wants to see. But having said that, like for whatever reason, because when I was young, and I had a lot of iterations of myself. I mean, it wasn't like I would like turn into one sort of category of person and be like, this is Darren the punk rock person, and then I have like these sort of articulations with hair and shirt. All those things were happening. It wasn't like a clear, like, I define myself as this, right? And like when I started smoking a bunch of pot and then going to see Dead shows, and I still, like, I never even I remember when I was at my first Dead show in '84. Yeah, Vegas '84. No, second. No, it was the first Dead show out of Colorado. There were all these fucking hipster doofuses that were all around, and we were smoking some weed. I think me and Josh and no, it wasn't. It was '95. It was those '95 Dead shows.
In Vegas?
Yeah, because if you're with Pickle, like, there's no real space for a social person to exist. So, but me and Dave and Josh would be sitting there smoking weed, and one of the things that really smacked me upside the head was that even though I might have looked like I played the part, like, I didn't identify with a lot of the folks that were around those areas, because like there was the whole idea of what it meant to be inside of a Grateful Dead community, and then that self-image played itself out in certain ways inside of a lot of people, but like it was very contradictory in the way that it played itself out. So I, generally speaking, did not find myself blending into a lot of those social spaces.
But at that point, or is this what you're talking about? Because I'm guessing by then most of the Trustafarians were there. It was a lot of those people that attended like Woodstock '99, even though it was '95. Um, so it wasn't the Grateful Dead or even like um, the Bluegrass Festival crowd or anything like that. It was starting to become something
Different.
entirely
Yeah.
different.
There's this wonderful song by Fish called Gogly Apparatus, right? And like the lead in lyrics of the song are, and he wrote this when he was like in third or fourth grade, right? He said, I look into the finance box just to check my status. Status. I look into the microscope, I see a googly apparatus. So then it goes to I saw you with the ticket stub in your hand. I saw you, so like there's this correlation between, yeah, like I remember when we were in 95 at 95 New Year's and like everybody's smoking there like we're outside of Madison Square Garden with puffing and people are tripping and everybody's wandering around and there's this one guy that's like he's got dreadlocks and he just like totally like studio fucking hippie, right? And this guy's like the studio hippie's like, you call yourself a fish head, I was at this show and I was at that show and I was at this show and that show and I haven't seen you at any of those. You don't know anything about fish. And in the back of my head, it was just I saw you with the ticket stub, because that's at some point, yeah, and like with the Dead, like especially like when the when like the nitrous and everybody getting fucked up so much, like it was really about if there was ever a moment where there was something that was pure, something that was thoughtful, and I think that that's kind of like an obscene notion in and of itself. Um, yes, it was bastardized. A lot of that stuff was lost. So yes, when I saw that, it was at a certain moment. But to bring it back full circle to where like because I always get right to the point when I start to say things, right? I was looking at the punk rock stuff, right? Because it had been I mentioned to you, not on air, but the last time I saw Sid and Nancy, I was like 13 or 14 years old, and or maybe whatever. I was very young, and my relationship to punk rock was incredibly fucking naive. I'd gone to a few shows, from fucking Circle Jerks and Fugazi to the Warlock Pinchers, which of course is like the local band that like I saw. Somebody actually told me that they saw me when I was like 13 years on Teletoons, standing over a speaker, just fucking going crazy, banging my head, like fucking hilarious, made me fucking laugh. But I saw all of those shows, but again, like the meaning, the ideas that were behind what was happening. While I had a ton of that angst inside of me naturally, again, I wasn't like looking at myself and saying. So I kind of like started to look at like I looked at that because I was kind of trying to imagine, Manchester, like, the UK, like London during this time period where like a working class position was sort of like exploding into sort of like expressions of like political thoughts and sort of expressions of nihilism, like anarchic dispositions because they saw like the utter hypocrisy of British social life, British, political life, and then it emerged through these various different fucking avenues that went everywhere from like Gigi Allen, like to um, all these these other Minutemen Exploited, and Sex Pistols, obviously. Um, but then but like the way that I engaged in it in my mind and in my act was through this. I was a white suburban kid, and I was not my parents were poor, but a lot of my friends' parents were not poor, So there was this contradiction between a middle class, upper middle class, and true like working class people. And then I started to think about Suburbia, that movie Suburbia, and stuff like The River's Edge or all these. And I don't mean the Suburbia that was remade in the 2000s. I mean the original version that was made in 1983 that had Flea in it as a.
They remade it?
Yeah, they remade it in like 2000 or something like that. But it's got like fleas in it as a fucking 15-year-old, and he's got the fucking gap in his teeth. I mean, I was like looking at him. I was like, there's no fucking way. I was like, dude, that gap is unmistakable. That's got to be Flea. And I looked up, and sure as fuck, Flea was in it.
I think he's been in like 4 movies. Most of them not good movies.
Well, so the main punk guy in Suburbia, and I'm gonna go down on a bunch of time, but I'm gonna go back after this one. The main punk guy, like the leader of the group, this blonde-headed kid, was in another movie that another person from Red Hot Chili Peppers was in, Anthony Kiedis. He was in Point Break. He hung out with all those fucking
Yeah.
speedheads, right? But he goes from being the punk guy in suburbia to being a fucking meth dealer in fucking Point Break. But either way, I was trying to imagine that punk space, and I wish I would have gotten it. If I had time, I'd have gone and watched SLC Punk, because it would have been interesting to kind of like see again.
I love that fucking movie.
When that was made in like 2003, 2005,
Yeah, it
somewhere
was
around
later.
there. But to kind of like continue to see like that social political consciousness emerge throughout time and develop and evolve, because the way that fucking Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious were relating to punk was quite a bit different than the way that those kids that were.
So, SLC Punk, have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's a great flick, but it kind of illustrates both the argument that you and I were having earlier today about rich kid versus poor kid, or middle class kid, right? But it also kind of talks about the question that I asked on the last episode, where I was like, what the fuck can we do now? The line keeps being pushed, and then it comes back, pushed again. Why did these people give up on whatever it is, whether it be Ice Cube or the hippies or whoever? So in SLC Punk, I don't know most of the people in it.
What was that? What's the thing though? What's the main?
Well, so Matthew Lillard plays like the main punk rock kid. And it's about growing up in this oppressive
Salt Lake City.
Lake City, where,
fucking rich white Mormons,
52% of the population is not Mormon, but the Mormons make all of the laws. Well, his dad,
it's like Mormon Jerusalem,
was a rich attorney. And he always made comments about how his dad used to be a hippie and then just decided to go ahead and buy in.
Was his dad Mormon or no?
They don't
talk about
speak specifically about that, but I don't think so. Well, he and his group were always talking shit about the people that like wore the A t-shirts, how they were basically just fakes,
the anarchy t-shirts, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Or I was like, is he talking about like Mr. T?
Like a jean jacket with fucking safety pins in it, or putting safety pins in your ear.
The studs,
Yeah. So he was always talking trash about those people as just being posers and not understanding what punk is about.
Punk,
his buddy, one of them, was an alcoholic who was absolutely against drugs. Another dude that was in it, he ended up being in that fucking shitty show How I Met Your Mother. The big dude, no idea.
I'm so happy to say that I don't really know. I mean, I think it had Doogie Howser in it or something like that, didn't it?
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't know though.
It wasn't a show that I watched a bunch, but a
tall kid that was in How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, and he's been in a couple of other things. But anyway, he was in it. The dude that played the main character in Final Destination, he was in it.
Another movie that I'm happy to say that I've never seen.
But anyway, well, the dude from Final Destination ended up going batshit crazy because he accidentally fucking took like 100 and some hits of LSD because he had him in his pocket and he was running from the cops. And it was like snowing and raining,
sweating or something like that. And
it got wet
into his body.
Yeah,
so funny. It's like an awesome urban myth, dude.
At the end of the movie, and this is not the awesome part. It's still a really good movie though. But at the end of the movie, the main character, one of his friends had died. One of them's in the fucking loony bin.
Steve Lillard. Okay, I remember that's that goofy guy from fucking. He played in Hackers and shit like that.
Yes. Matthew Lillard?
Yes.
Yeah, he was the one that played the weird dude who was always mooching people's fries in Hackers.
Yeah, that's true.
So he finally just said, you know what, fuck it, and told his dad he was going to go ahead and go back to school and become an
Oh, so he
attorney.
totally fills out.
Right, and that's why I was saying, because there were rich kids and poor kids in the group, and the dad was a hippie who ended up becoming an attorney. And then the kid himself, who fucking hated everything that his dad stood for, finally said, you know what, fuck it, I gotta buy in, or I gotta sell out, depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Half full, half empty. But it's a great flick. SLC Punk is one of my favorites.
Well, I mean that sort of like puts the question, because that we were like trying to negotiate a little bit more in a more pronounced way. Like, do these, like, one of the things that I always sort of like imagined when I was watching these other kids were like, I took uh, breaking away from social dispositions very seriously. Like, I mean, very like in the like most honest Cartesian sense of the word. Like, I had all this knowledge that was presented to me as a child, because I did grow up Mormon. The kid that actually directed it, he grew up in Salt Lake City, so it was definitely autobiographical, at least on some level. The guy that made SLC Punk. When you were talking, I was kind of looking at that for a second, but there's this sort of like idea that, like, in the context of catharsis, that like you allow kids to rebel so that they can go through the process of rebelling, so that they can come back to being a productive member of society, where like Sid Vicious, uh so like Johnny Rotten, sort of, he wrote the words for all their music. Like, he was the one that like had the vision, at least in terms of, you know, I wanna be anarchy.
Anarchy.
Like, that was definitely like Johnny Rotten. Like, and then through like Public Image Limited, after he got away from when everything went shitty in '78, when they were on their tour
Fuck the
in the United
Queen.
States. Yeah,
Fuck EMI.
yeah. He was pretty much against it all.
He was a real tactician.
But so Sid, he meets fucking Nancy. And Johnny Rotten actually shares a birthday with me. What a guy. What is that? That explains why he's so like he's got such great vision. But um, so like him and Johnny were inseparable at the beginning, right? And then they meet that crazy chick, and somebody's like, "Don't fucking hang out with her. She's a fucking junkie," right? And he actually gives her some fucking money, like Sid Vicious does, and she fucking totally snakes it from him, goes off, and then he finds her again and like starts beating her up, and like, I fucking want my money back. I want my fucking drugs. And so some weird turn of events, and she gives him all these fucking drugs, but they end up becoming fucking junkies together, right? And ultimately, the weird thing happens to where she gets stabbed in 70 in October of, I guess it would be October 78. I mean, literally like 6 months after the tour, like, I mean, like their whole existence was so concentrated. It's odd to like look at the Sex Pistols and think about how many aspects of punk rock tie back to that, but it's literally like such a fucking teeny little temporal blip on the fucking radar. But all that shit fucking sort of degenerates between them all. Like, there's this vision, this anarchic disposition, this total fucking nihilistic sensibility, but like, which results in them breaking up, the Public Image Limited stuff going through Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious trying to have like a mini fucking solo career, and the weird incident where like nobody really knows what happened in that fucking hotel that night, whether or not he did stab her, whether or not, like, the way that they portrayed it in the film was that she actually, they're yelling at each other and cussing at each other, and she takes a run at him. He's like, "You want me to stab you? Do you want?" And then she takes a run at him, and she stabs herself for all intents and purposes. They don't fucking call the fucking paramedics. They're like in bed together, and she's been like fucking bleeding for hours. She goes in the bathroom and then she fucking collapses, right? So the cops show up, and they're asking him, who called the cops, who called the cops, who called the cops, and he's not answering because he's basically catatonic. Because I mean, clearly Sid and Nancy did not have a very healthy social set of interactions. Like, it was not good by any stretch of the imagination. But he like he still was, whether healthy or not, like they were really into each other, right? So she dies. They send him to fucking Rikers Island for 55 days because that's the holding place, right? And they bail him out. He goes to a fucking party. So in real life, he goes to a party and takes a lethal dose of heroin and fucking dies. But not in real life. There's these kids that he runs into, and this is in the UK. So my thought is that this is like part of one of the fantasy aspects of his, and like you, obviously when you're making a film, you have, the ability to do whatever the fuck you want. Um, but these kids that he interacts with in the UK, they end up being there. He's like, he gets out of Rikers Island, he goes and he has a fucking, he's like, I want a slice of pizza, So he goes and has a fucking slice of pizza. Comes out, and these three kids, and they're standing there with the ghetto blaster, and they're listening to um, make a little dance, do a little dance, make a little love, and they're like, dance with us. So Sid Vicious is like sitting there dancing with them, right? And it's fucking kind of a hilarious little scene. And then a cab fucking drives up. He looks inside, and there's fucking Nancy sitting there in a fucking wedding dress. And he gets in, and they drive off. So like that's like sort of like a fantasy space, obviously, but it ties back to this other part earlier in the movie where somehow or another, Nancy arranges for him to meet her parents and her grandparents. Her grandparents come pick him up, take him to where they live in like Staten Island or something like that, right? And they're all sitting around the fucking table. Nancy's next to him. He's got his fucking arm around her like this with a fucking pint of schnapps in his fucking hand. He's got no fucking shirt on. He's totally fucking lit. And Dad's sitting next to Sid on the other side, and he says, what are your intentions with our daughter? He's like, intentions, and he says, are you gonna make an honest woman of her? And he says, she's been honest ever since I met her. Everything she said to me has been the truth. And like, obviously he wants her to say whether or not he's gonna fucking marry her. And so like it wraps back around to that point. But in a kind of obnoxious sort of like, like fantasy sort of like way. Like I mean, there's no marriage that was ever going to happen between the two of them. Two other points. He was 21 when he died, which I didn't realize he was so fucking young when he died. And I think that fucking kind of hilariously, and I don't know if this is just like, the gods like laughing at us, but he died on Groundhog's Day. Like, and I think that that's so like wonderfully beautiful in terms of symbolism, because everything for fucking Sid Vicious would have been the same every day from here until the end of time, no matter what.
Right.
He was never going to evolve or change. So like, if there's something inside of the movement, and this is kind of the bigger point that I was making, Johnny Rotten had a vision for something. Sid Vicious was a fucking horrible bass player, not a great fucking musician, a total fucking dipshit, an artist to be sure, but there was not a real direction that aspect of the punk rock scene was going.
Well, a lot of those guys in punk rock, whether you're talking about UK punk rock or New York punk rock or Detroit or LA, a lot of them didn't know how to fucking play instruments. I mean, at least initially. Like the manager of Black Flag, no, sorry, the manager of the Germs was talking about the fact that to begin with, none of them knew how to play instruments. The way that they kind of camouflage that was like one of them would like rub peanut butter all over himself or cut himself and bleed all over the stage, something to,
it'd be like an act more than
make you look another way so that you could not realize how
like
they didn't know how to
G.G.
play.
Allen would he'd take shits on stage and stuff like that.
Well, when you said that, it reminded me of fucking Frank Zappa and Ozzy Osbourne. And I don't know if this is a fucking urban myth or not, but I always heard, now the bat thing probably is an urban myth, but I always heard that Ozzy and Frank Zappa had a bet that they were always trying to outdo each other to see, who could do this better, who could do this. And one night it was who would do the most disgusting thing.
Hmm.
And Ozzy Osbourne took a shit on stage. Frank Zappa went up and ate it.
What?
I don't know, dude. That's just some shit.
Well, I mean, the irony to comparing that situation to them is that Frank Zappa was a fucking musical genius, dude.
That I wasn't saying anything
No,
about
I
his.
know, but like the crazy thing as a way of detracting would definitely not apply him.
No,
And not
no.
even for Ozzy. I mean, I don't think Ozzy was the super genius of, but dude, fucking War Pigs, like in terms of the structure of a song, is just fucking awesome, dude. You know, maybe not. I am Iron Man. Tommy, whatever his name was, he was a pretty good guitar player, whatever. But Iron Man's not the most brilliant. It's like Deep Purple. You know?
No, but I mean that was
Yeah, that's disgusting.
the start of heavy metal, and I don't know. Not the Frank Zappa, Ozzy Osbourne shit thing was the start of
But
heavy
I'm gonna
metal,
have to look that up now and see. Did Frank Zappa?
or I could be confusing it. Maybe Frank took the shit and Ozzy ate it.
I'm not certain at that point in time that it really. I mean, it does, I guess, on some level.
It doesn't
matter
make
which
a
direction
huge
it
amount of
goes.
difference,
Yeah.
except for maybe one of them ended up with fucking hepatitis C or some shit.
Fecal matters.
So Sid Vicious died in 1979. You said that he was at a party, and he was in New York at the time. So was he partying with any of the people from like CBGB? Was he partying with anybody else that was famous?
Because I was just watching the movie, there were certain things that I could get into with regards to the specs, but I couldn't. I didn't get that far into it.
Okay.
But you want to hear something else funny about the movie? So the movie was made in '86. All right. Courtney fucking Love was in the movie, which is.
I thought I just looked up the picture and I thought that was her, and then I thought no, that couldn't be her. But I don't know.
He closed out the page with the most forthright statement on the matter. For the records, folks, I never took a shit on stage, and the closest I ever came to eating shit anywhere was at a Holiday Inn buffet in Fayetteville, North Carolina in 1973. So
okay,
that was
clearly
an
urban myth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was Captain Beefheart. That was what they said. It wasn't Ozzy. So.
Well, and I don't know, like once you fucking sober up and it's fucking 30 years later, are you really gonna admit to eating shit?
You may not know this, but Frank Zappa never drank and never took a drug. Ever.
Okay.
He was totally sober. Now, he smoked 14 packs of cigarettes a day and died of fucking lung cancer. I think it was lung cancer he died of, but.
Dude, that's weird because both of his kids seemed like they were on drugs too. Both Dweezil and Moon.
He was not only, he was very, he did not accept it in the people that he played with either. Like, Zappa was about being there. Like, if you look at, like honestly, like, if you go through, like, fucking Thingfish or, even Joe's Garage and shit like that, he and the people that he surrounded himself with were, I mean, they all had jazz backgrounds. He wanted you to be, if you could not rise to the mental level of the music that they were trying to create, you were fired. That's why Steve Vai was, I know Steve Vai drank a fair amount in his day and probably tripped a little bit in this and that, but when it came to being with Frank Zappa, he kept Steve Vai because he was incredibly technically proficient,
Yeah.
and that is doesn't nearly capture Steve Vai's guitar capabilities. So, yeah, he was sober. Weird. I didn't realize that either. I was like, what the fuck? But he didn't tolerate it, not at all.
Wow.
So that's no fecal matters in memory.
That's crazy, dude. And it's just so you just now saying the drug thing. So I think I've mentioned it on the show before, but Mike Judge did 2 seasons of the I always want to call it the fucking Magic Bus tour, but I don't know. So the first season was about country music and the second season was about like R&B.
And they went on tour or something like that with them, or what was it?
No, he just went, and it was like a documentary about these people that were on tour. And one of the episodes they were talking about being on two different buses, and apparently Waylon Jennings didn't like drugs. He didn't like coke or weed. Willie liked coke and weed.
Just a little, just a touch.
And something happened. You guys have to watch the show, but anyway.
What was it called again?
Fuck. Mike Judge's.
Keep talking about the store. I'll find it.
Something Magic Bus Tour. I can't ever remember the fucking name, but it's a great fucking show too. No, I don't want to ruin it because there's a lot of it that just will make you laugh hysterically. Well, maybe not. It made me laugh hysterically. But basically, it ended up that there were a bunch of drugs on
Tales from the Tour Bus. Mike Judge presents.
Waylon's bus and not Willie's bus. And then the cops pulled both buses over. And I think Waylon thought that he was in the clear. And everybody on Willie's bus were kind of freaking out because they knew that there were a bunch of drugs on Waylon's bus. and he, didn't tolerate it. So,
so they were hiding him in there because
I can't remember, dude. And I tried to rewatch it the last time I talked about it, and I can't find it, at least the last time I looked, which was, I don't know, 2 months ago or whatever when we talked about it.
They don't have it listed anywhere. I mean,
yeah, you can't get it streaming. You can buy it on Prime, I think.
Yeah, that they showed, yeah.
But it's a great fucking show. Like, it might introduce you to some country music that you may have not
good
enjoyed.
Stuff, man.
Yeah. And then the second season is just as good. I mean, they talk about George Clinton fucking tripping acid. That's when I talked about it, was when we were talking about horror movies, I think, because George Clinton and P-Funk, they're driving around, I think, in Wisconsin or some shit. And they're all tripping. And they end up coming to like this dead end. And there are all these fucking zombies walking around. And they start freaking out. And it turns out that they like drove into the middle of fucking George Romero filming Night of the Living Dead. So just little shit like that. It's a funny fucking show.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could find like anything on YouTube. It's just a bunch of clips on YouTube, and you can buy it off YouTube too. But yeah, there's nowhere for free, nowhere to stream either.
So since we started off talking about the punk shit, I'm going to talk about this show, and then maybe we can segue into the heavy metal stuff because we didn't really cover it. So Penelope Spheris, who is the same director that did the movie Suburbia that Darren was just talking about. Her first movie out of film school was a documentary called The Decline of Western Civilization. And the first movie was about the Los Angeles punk scene. When the movie was released in LA, I'm sure they rolled out the red carpet and turned on some spotlights and shit. Basically, a small riot occurred. Daryl Gates, who was the police chief at the time, said, "We do not want this movie to be shown in LA ever again." Now, whether or not that happened to where they actually could shut down and not show the movie, because the movie caused
a riot?
Yeah. So they had to shut down Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, Jesus.
And I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a riot, but it was definitely some people. And you got to understand, I think on some level, back then, punk wasn't really considered music. It was like really rap. Considered like a nuisance.
Like rap at the beginning.
Yeah. So maybe that's
hip-hop for that matter.
That's what it was just them saying, "Fuck you, we're not going to tolerate your music or your fucking slam dancing, or anything." fuck you guys. Don't play this shit again. So she did a really good documentary, and again, it was called The Decline of Western Civilization. It talked about bands like Black Flag, The Germs, Catholic Discipline, Circle Jerks. What's another LA punk band?
I don't know about out of LA. I don't know. Agnostic Front. I don't know.
Anyway, if you want to learn more about punk rock music, or if you're a punk rock fan, I highly recommend it.
Or if you want to look at it in the context of what we're doing, to see if there was an actual movement out of those things, something to raise consciousness. Was it something that got appropriated by the fucking market so quickly that it didn't even mean anything at the end of the day?
It was a great movie. The film is a little grainy. The audio isn't perfect all of the time, but it's a quality flick. There's another show, since I'm on the punk rock thing. So before MGM Plus was MGM Plus, it was a channel actually on cable called Epics. And they did a 4-part series called Punk. And that is another fucking excellent show, because they talk about British punk and New York punk and Detroit punk and LA punk, and they kind of cover the gamut with regard to, you know, punk rock music and how it evolved, you know, to where I think they finish it off with, you know, Green Day, which you know how I feel about Green Day based on the last episode. But they also talk about like Nirvana and Bad Religion, and how it went into, you know, these guys that were basically playing for peanuts to, you know, multi-million-dollar artists. Since I did just mention Nirvana, and Darren mentioned Courtney Love, I think maybe we can discuss this a little bit before I talk about the metal years, but I think one of the reasons that I liked Nirvana versus Green Day was because Green Day was the band saying, "Look at me, look at me." Nirvana had that angst, and they were saying, fuck you to the system, and fuck you to education, fuck you to everybody, including the people that should have been looking at them. Like, anytime MTV wanted to do a fucking interview with them, Kurt Cobain was like, fuck you, I'm not talking to you, I don't want to do an interview. Quit asking. Well, the record company said we could do it. Well, then go talk to the fucking record company. And I know I never said that, but I think that's one of the reasons. Well, that, and that the lyrics and the music were actually good, in my opinion, compared to Green Day. So I think that's why I liked Nirvana, and why I absolutely hated Green Day.
Dude, Nirvana was, I mean, it was emotionally up, and I mean, it was very manic depressing kind of stuff, you know, like Lithium, all that kind of stuff. But before we get like over into the metal side, one thing, part of the reason why the Suburbia one was so fucking cool was because, like I said, Sid, Johnny, maybe that was sort of like the inception of it, right? But one of the things that was so interesting about some of the things that developed before we took this fucking no effects Green Day pop punk fucking left turn, when you still had like when it was Circle Jerks, Minor Threat, you know, Exploited, there was a working class component to it. There was an anarchic disposition to it. There was a Marxist disposition to it sometimes, the Minutemen. But the tension of working class experiences, particularly in the 1980s in the U.S., they use this image. So the first image of the movie starts with This girl that's running away, um, who she ends up killing herself at the end because she just doesn't feel like it's worth it living anymore. And she was part of this community of people that all lived together in this squatter place. Uh, but this incident occurs where um, she's hitchhiking. A mother who has her 3-year-old daughter sitting in a baby seat next to her in the front seat, which is fucking hilarious. Definitely shows you the 1980s. Fucking do that shit anymore. But sitting in between them, they blow a tire. They get out of the car. They walk. They find a payphone, and like the baby's crying while she's trying to call a tow truck, and she hands it to this girl, this teenage girl who's hitchhiking, and a wild dog comes up and mauls the 3-year-old baby, right? Like totally like what the fuck, like scene. And it turns out that the squatter place where all these kids who are runaways or they don't live at home for any number of reasons, right? Um, all these wild dogs live in this area where, again, like I think it was an industrial town where, like because of like what ended up turning into NAFTA in '94, but because you started to see companies leaving to Mexico, going to China, going to Taiwan, or that's all over the place. The industrial part of the United States was disappearing. People were losing their jobs. They were getting scared. They were getting reactionary. So you have one group of people that are uh, like hillbillies, guns, want to go after somebody, and then you have this other group of people that are more like the punkers, right? And uh, so the next turn of events, this boy's mom is an alcoholic. She marks on a bottle because she thinks her son's trying to steal her booze from her. Uh, and of course, she's just drinking so much that she doesn't realize that she's doing it to herself. So the kid gets up and walks outside. His brother is sitting on a big wheel, fucking big wheels, man. I haven't seen big wheel for 100 fucking years. And the kid fucking says to his brother, I gotta leave. I'm gonna go. Mom will be better if she's only got you, right? But that's not true. What ends up happening is she gets him in a fucking drunk driving accident. He goes back and grabs his little brother and takes him to this fucking house with him because he knew, even at 14 or 13 or whatever he was, that his brother was safer there with him than he was with
the drunkard mom.
Right? So and so that's like you have this little girl who's running away from home. It turns out that her father had molested her and beat the shit out of her. She commits suicide. They take her back to her parents' house. They go to the fucking funeral. They're at the funeral. The mom's crying. Tells the father that to get those punkers out of there, and confronts them and her boyfriend, who is this really sweet kid that just basically wanted to create a space where she felt safe, because that was all they were trying to have was a family. They had no family in their own spaces. So through the destruction of this industrial town, these kids, homeless, living in this space, create their own concept of family. Like I said, Coyle, the what's his name? That he played the number 2 character, Billy Coyne. Evan Johnson was the character's name. He goes and, like I said, he brings his brother there, and then these fucking hillbillies come and attack him because they make this huge thing up about how they went and fucked with the funeral home and all that stuff, and they've been at a strip club, so they're getting all pumped up. They got their guns. They show up at the fucking place. These punkers fuck him up like fucking bad. They fucking drive away. They turn around. They fucking come back. And his little brother's so fucking cool. Like he brings him back, and he's got this little fucking 7-year-old kid with a giant fucking mohawk. And as soon as it happens, you know what's gonna happen. These guys are fucking coming at him. Everybody gets out of the way except the little kid. The little kid gets fucking run over and flips up on top of the car. And of course, the tragedy is that these kids are trying to find a safe place, and they're actually doing it, I won't say honestly, because they're, you know,
panhandling and stealing.
getting their food by robbing open garages and shit like that. But given the time period, there's a million more things that you could be doing, and they're just trying to survive. And because these hillbillies who've all lost their fucking jobs because they worked at the GM factory that disappeared, they want to exact revenge, and they do it on the people that are the weakest children,
Or they just find, who they can blame,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, it was like fucking Tulsa in 1921.
Yes, yeah, yes.
They're blaming
exactly the same
them
thing.
for the bullshit that
Black Wall
either
Street is
they
what we're
they
referring to.
caused themselves by not educating themselves or whatever, or the black people didn't have anything to do with it, just like the punk rockers didn't, but they were new.
It was an easy target, just like in Europe for the last 10 years, it's been immigrants, just like it's been immigrants here for a long time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's the only reason why I wanted to bring it up, was because in that moment, the punk space really did become sort of like a codified social disposition, but certainly not one that had they didn't have any power, they didn't have any access to resources. So they were doing something, but it was still very reactionary, not meaningful, and it turned into where it just got, like you said, it turned into Green Day, NoFX, and a bunch of kids skateboarding, middle class kids skateboarding. That if there was anything meaningful, that where it grew from in the first place, if it was in Manchester, working class kids in England or wherever it started from.
It's so weird the way that the music cycles work, and of course, we're not really pulling hip hop into this portion of the conversation. Of course, I guess I could, because a lot of hip hop people said that New York hip hop at its roots, at its beginning, started alongside punk. So the hip hop in New York to begin with was more punk. In Detroit, they didn't have punk rock. What they had was techno. So in Detroit, hip hop was more techno. And then in LA, Ice-T described it as Lamaze music, because they were all so that's what they had in LA.
Do that again. How'd that go again? And this was hip hop music that was.
Well, it was kind of hip hop growing beside whatever other popular music was in that region.
Lamaze, you said?
That's what Ice-T called it, was Lamaze music.
That's kind of funny.
That's what they had in LA. But the reason that I mentioned those things is kind of unclear to me, because I started talking to you.
Hip hop. You were talking about what, like hip hop?
Oh yeah, well, we're not pulling the hip hop into it, but the reason, so music generally rolls in like some kind of cycle, but I think that it was weird. And Green Day, for some reason, they actually considered punk, but Nirvana, I thought, had always been considered grunge, but they were on that punk documentary, and they are kind of punk rock. I'll give you that. But so punk rock was there, and then all of the punk rockers were kind of pissed off, because then all of a sudden heavy metal came in, even though a lot of it wasn't heavy, because they were wearing lipstick and singing ballads and whatever. But then all of the
Robert Smithish,
the headbangers were pissed off. No, more like Motley Crue-ish.
Oh, okay, that kind of lipstick of people. Okay, I'm sorry, I was going in a different direction. I apologize.
And then all of the headbangers were pissed because they got bumped off, and all of a sudden their sales started going in the toilet because this grunge shit came in. So when grunge came in, that's when Yo MTV Raps got real big on MTV, and then you started seeing hip hop growing leaps and bounds. I mean,
who did Yo MTV Raps? Who was that?
His name was Fab Five Freddy.
Oh, it was from fucking that's what's his name? From Public Enemy. Was it?
No, that's Flavor Flav.
Oh, okay. It was that. Okay. Why am I
Fab
crossing that
Five
over?
Freddy was like an artist, and he helped hip hop spread throughout the boroughs because he did a lot of art in um, like Manhattan and shit. But Fab Five Freddy, I don't think he was ever in a hip hop band. I'm pretty sure you're thinking
They
of Flavor Flav.
yeah, I was. They actually identify him as a visual artist,
Okay,
which I don't know what the fuck that means, but
I don't either. But I know he was an artist. And, a rap fan. And he knew a lot of these guys that were doing the stuff that they were doing, whether it was, I don't know which one of them it was, Grandmaster Flash or whoever.
they identify him as the coolest person in New York, and I see a picture of him here with Jean-Michel Basquiat. So
Yeah. So he knew a lot of the people from CBGB
mm-hmm.
and, from probably Studio 54 because they were around simultaneously. So, and I am going to talk more about hip hop, but because of the fact that we did kind of leave heavy metal out as a subculture or counterculture in the first two, I kind of want to
go ahead, carry on,
just talk about the metal years, which is the second part of the decline of Western civilization. So basically, they're on Hollywood Boulevard. They're looking at all of the bands that are playing at Whiskey a Go Go and all of those kind of places. They're also showing, these guys doing drugs and fucking drinking themselves to death, and they talk about how, somebody died in a drunk driving accident, somebody OD'd, and I think they talked to Nicky Sixx because he OD'd like fucking 3 times. So it talks about heavy metal, and probably in high school, I was more of a metalhead than a punk. But again, I am sort of along the lines as Darren, like my music could be considered eclectic to say the least. I listen to a lot of blues, I listen to jazz.
Our identity is a lot more transient, like it doesn't get stuck in.
Yeah, I don't need to have, like, again, the only genre of music that I don't really like is country or country western, and even that isn't hard and fast because, again, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson.
Yeah, the singer-songwriters,
yeah,
the good ones.
So those guys. But what I guess the reason I really wanted to mention the metal years is because all three of those movies are good. So the last one of her Decline of Western Civilization series is about the gutter punks. So it's about these middle class kids that basically become homeless and they're panhandling and shit and skateboarding, like Darren said. But if they wanted to, they could go back home, but they listen to punk rock music and live on the streets. So all three of them are excellent fucking movies, especially if you want to see not necessarily how music influenced society, but how a particular genre of music influenced enough people to where it could have been considered sub or counterculture. So they're good movies, and as depressing as they are, I can understand why she calls it the decline of Western civilization.
You know what's interesting about metal too, though, is in that same context, like you take a band like Metallica, right? And because they were sort of at the beginning, with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and some of those other, like Garage Days Revisited. Like you have these early moments of it where it was highly technical, It was angsty. You had to be incredibly proficient in your guitar solos if you wanted to be able to play in a space like that. But it was technical, not in a free way. Like although I listened to a version of like Nothing Else Matters the other day. It was like a 14-minute version of that song. Back then, there was no that you weren't gonna hear Master of Puppets. It was gonna be, generally speaking, roughly as long as Master of Puppets is. Like it's not gonna deviate from that general structure. And they've given themselves a little bit more space. And that doesn't mean that they're not doing the same thing Fish or the Dead would be doing, but those initial spaces, it was about a certain thing, but then you had all that fucking hairband fucking nastiness, and it was about, drugs and blowjobs and, Tina Height and, all those fucking girls,
Yeah.
More Tina than Trish. Sorry, Tina. I don't want to hate on anybody, but we are who we are, right? And it was about aesthetics, I mean, Bret Michaels was not a really great songwriter. Tommy Lee, he might have he might take Pamela and he might put her in the hospital by dick slapping her or something like that. But again, like some of them were better musicians than others,
I
right?
wasn't a huge fan of Motley Crue or Poison or Cinderella or any of that softer stuff. The lipstick heavy metal.
Yeah.
But Metallica, I was a huge fan of.
Until
I loved Megadeth, I loved Slayer.
Metallica
until Black.
The Black Album.
Yeah.
Then they turned. I mean, it was almost like that, and there was technically more sound than fucking Poison, but still, like.
Yeah, there's a point, and I understand. Like, both of us are always talking about growth. We've got to grow. We've got to do this, be better, learn this, do this, whatever. I just don't know if the Black Album was truly about growth or if it was just getting more radio play.
Yeah. I mean, Enter Sandman, was tacky, and there were still a couple of good songs on the Black Album. Is Sad But True on it, or what is, or Nothing Else Matters is on that one, isn't
it? Yeah, that should be right. I don't know. I bought it.
So did I.
But I didn't like it after about 2 weeks. Because again, it was like it wasn't about growth. It wasn't about becoming more technically proficient or introducing a new sound.
The wasn't a horrible song. Oh, Jesus Christ, that really is a bad album, dude. Yeah, Sad But True. And The Unforgiven, other than that. Oh, and Nothing Else Matters. Yeah, all three of those are on there.
Yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't make it any better.
No. Well, dude, I mean, when you're comparing it with their other stuff was really good. I mean, it really was fucking very good, I mean.
Well, so here's kind of the funny thing, and this is kind of why I wanted to talk about the metal years. Because, I mean, you're talking about a band that said, I killed your baby today.
Doesn't matter that much to me.
As long as it's dead.
Yeah.
And
Joy
now
and compassion.
They've got songs on commercials, on major motion pictures. So again, this thing that was subversive, offensive, Tipper Gore had Metallica on their hit list on just as much as Twisted Sister or NWA or
Mix-a-Lot or Luke Skywalker. What's their name?
Yeah, and the Two Live Crew.
Yeah.
Any of those bands, I mean, they were on that list also, and now not. Now it's just acceptable. And maybe it is just because of growth, and maybe because I'm so fucking set in my ways and that, I've got fucking concrete boots that I can't see that it is growth, and I consider it selling out. But as far as I'm concerned, every album after Black is horseshit.
Yeah, I've listened to them, but I don't even like I don't remember them. If you cannot have the ability to take me somewhere or to permeate my consciousness, but I'm pretty open. I'll listen to whatever.
Yeah.
You don't like I want you to introduce me to a new kind of music that I've never heard before and have it fucking transport me to somewhere that I've never been. I'll always go there. But
Well, and here's what's funny is that the crossover shit that is on major motion pictures and commercials and whatever isn't any of the stuff from new albums. It's off of Master. It's off of fucking And Justice for All.
That was the innovative spaces. Shit, it would have been what is that song? The I got something to say. What is that name of that song?
It doesn't matter much to me as long as it's dead.
It was on Garage Days, though.
Yeah,
right?
It was. Or was it on Ride the Lightning?
Some of Garage Days was duplicated, I think.
Probably.
But you're right. Of course, what you're saying is correct, because the fact is that they, nothing that they're doing, and look, I don't have any fucking problem with crossover stuff. I mean, I listen to like all the bluegrass stuff that I listen to today, reaches out and touches it. I mean, fucking Billy Strings is fucking covering. What did I tell you they were covering the other day? The Crown of Thorns. From fucking what's the name of that band? Pearl Jam before it was Pearl Jam.
Yellow Ledbetter?
No, not Yellow Ledbetter. That's a great song though. I think probably that's like Pearl Jam's like most sophisticated I mean, definitely Mike McCready's best guitar work is on that fucking song. And Yellow Ledbetter's Pearl Jam anyway.
I thought that was the name of their band before they became Pearl Jam.
Yellow Ledbetter's the song about the brother coming home in a body bag or something like that. So Last Caress, Green Hell. Green Hell's the name of that song, right? Yeah, okay. Why can I not remember? Crown of Thorns, and they did that album together with Chris Cornell, and that was the homage to, because the guy died of a heroin overdose. Boom, 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 boom.
Mother Love Bone.
Mother Love Bone, that's it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And I didn't remember that. I actually had to look it up.
Okay. It was good that you brought it in, because I don't think anybody wants to hear me sing my tone-deaf melodies, so.
So, sell out or buying in, again, I don't know, or if it is truly growth, but I do think Metallica sucks now. However, I think even Tipper Gore and George Bush Sr., if he were still alive, would be accepting of them now, because it is mainstream shit. And
do you think that when Tipper Gore was doing that stuff and she put the strap on, that she was giving fucking George Bush Sr. a reach around during those moments? Or do you think that she was probably just...
Al was just sitting there being fucking a cuckold?
Yeah, he said, you know what, George, this is a real inconvenient truth. Take that, put that in your fucking pipe and smoke it, Tipper.
But I don't know of any... I guess I don't know of any heavy metal people that ended up being in movies that I can remember. I know that Netflix a few years ago had that movie called Dirt that was about Motley Crue, and that was a fairly entertaining movie.
Yeah, Dale thought it was real funny. You tried to get me to watch it. I haven't watched it.
Well, the opening fucking scene is some chick squirting. Like they're in.
You can't go wrong when a movie starts with a girl squirting. That's like a win right out the gate. You can only go down from there.
They're in some shitty apartment. The cops have kicked in the door so much that it's fucking like nailed shut. So they have to enter the apartment through the window. So all these people are coming in and out through the window. And they're like, you gotta see this, you gotta see this. And this chick's just like, I think she's on the chair or the couch or something in the middle of this party. She's just masturbating and
I was
oh.
about to ask who triggered the tidal wave, but it was just her. She was pulling the trigger
If
out.
I remember correctly, but somebody may have fucked her too. I don't know.
I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, potential dispositions.
Right.
That's
So, but I can't remember. I mean, aside from different songs being on movies where they wouldn't have been before, and Metallica specifically, I can't think of anybody, you know, and he's punk, but like Iggy Pop, I've seen him in a couple of movies. Flea, Anthony Kiedis, like you said. Um, Rappers, obviously, we talked about Ice Cube, Ice T, LL Cool J. They're actors now. Method Man, Redman, they've been in movies. But I can't think of any fucking headbangers that are in movies.
You know the girl that I lost my virginity to was a squirter. That's like not fair because that's totally misleading.
I'm not gonna talk about any of the girls that I banged on the show.
I didn't say any names. I just said that look, like if the first girl that you have sex with is a squirter, that's misleading.
Well, and I know, like, I was at a party and this guy, Aaron, was talking about his girlfriend being a squirter, and he said that it scared him. I don't know that it ever scared me.
Yeah, that's not generally a fear production moment.
But it didn't ever throw me into, like, there's an entire fucking category on internet porn that just squirting. Looks for squirting. Yeah. I don't know that I'm so into it that I have to seek that shit out, but whatever.
I'm not gonna frown. I don't think it's something to frown against. I mean, not that it's something that sets, like you said, sets the disposition necessarily in one direction or another. But
right.
If you're playing music and there's a little applause, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's demonstrable applause, I would think.
So this is kind of a tangent, but maybe not.
You're going to squirt in a different direction?
No, well, we were sort of talking about movies, and I mentioned the squirting thing, so I can kind of understand.
The heavy metal movie, Dirt?
Dirt. Okay. And it's like it's not a documentary.
No, but it's all those.
It's about the Motley Crue guys. Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned porn with regard to squirting. Now, I don't want to talk a whole lot about porn, but
I don't believe that statement.
It is one of those categories that were at least subculture, depending on what region of the country, was probably counterculture in a lot of ways. And now it is accepted. I mean, I'm guessing if you looked real deep into like your mutual funds for your 401k, I'm willing to bet that there would be some porn investments there.
I mean, but like whether it's counterculture or not, like is debatable though. I mean, relative to we talked about what's his name, the hustler guy.
Larry Flint.
Yeah, we went in that episode. There's no doubt that when he was doing what he was doing, things right now are at least qualitatively different than they were during that time period when it comes to acceptance or but even still, like and because we talked about prostitution in some other episodes, like our rhetorical disposition with the prostitution, if we accepted, like, do we accept porn because we accept the voyeuristic quality? If we can separate the deed, if we can separate the deed from the thing itself, the deed from the image of the deed itself, rather. Is that why we would accept porn? Because we're still total hypocrites when it comes to, like, I'm not sure that we've got quite to the point where, like, I'm pretty sure you're not going to go talk to Mormons and they're going to be like, Yeah, my kid can look at it. He can sit there. I'd rather have him sitting there jerking himself off than going out and having fucking babies at 14.
No, but it kind of goes along with our argument where, if they can make money off of it, then it's absorbed, and if they can't, then it's eliminated.
So they can keep it separated, like the money's there, but we're not talking about it then, or
Yeah, it's kind of under the table, so to speak. I mean, dude, they have, and they put it on. I think it was on Showtime every year, but it was the Adult Video
yeah, the
Awards.
awards, yeah.
And they all give out these fucking huge gold cocks for your trophy.
I think that's not. I think they should mix that up a little bit.
Also,
give a golden nipple here and there, and give a golden clit. Mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. That would be fair.
The swollen clit. There's a golden swollen clit.
The squirting badge.
Yeah, see. And you could even have a little pump inside of it, so if somebody
Well, and at the Consumer Electronics Show, they have weird shit like that. They're working on like the suits and shit that you can put on glasses and have virtual sex. So it's more accepted than it was.
Okay. Yeah, that I will not disagree with. I'm just not sure that it's quite gotten to the level of full blown. They're still aligned, maybe a little bit. It's still in process, but it'd be a different kind of sexual revolution.
Well, a lot of the former porn stars or current porn stars end up being in shows that everybody else watches. I mean, Entourage. Sasha Grey ended up being on one of the seasons of Entourage. And she was a porn star. Maybe still is, I don't know. Because I think in porn, especially from a female perspective, I think you only got about 3 years longevity. I mean,
it depends. There's a lot of kinks. There's a lot of fetish out there.
Yeah, well, but
the whole MILF category exists, right?
I think. Well, no, I'm just talking about just being banged out, dude. Like seriously.
I'm spent. I don't know, dude. Like maybe if they get those Kegel exercises going,
One movie I was watching, and I wish I could remember the name of it. They bust into like this porn show. It might be The Girl Next Door. I'm not positive. And one of the dudes was sitting at the bar. No, it's not The Girl Next Door. I'll think of it at some point. But this girl was like, well, I can't really do this anymore, and so I'm going to be losing money because I refuse to do double anal vaginal penetration and whatever. So that's the kind of shit where I'm talking about, where you just end up being busted out. I mean, if you're getting 2 dicks stuck in your ass, I'm pretty sure you're going to be done.
But you could always get a bukkake,
Yeah, maybe.
On that note, we're at about an hour and 20 minutes right now. So we're going to come back and we're going to spray some more thoughts at you.
Yeah, we'll finish busting you motherfuckers out.
720-334-ROLL.
Shortbusdebateclub at yahoo.com. See ya.